If you love Baltimore sports, you'll love WNST.net.
Welcome Chris Vinson onto the air. Chris, you got your 5 minutes. Go for it, brother.
What's going on, Baltimore, Maryland? My name is Chris Vinson. You got it locked right here on 1570 AM, where we never stop talking Baltimore sports. And we've had a lot of other people come on and talk about the Ravens and the Orioles, so I don't really think I need to get into all that. I can tell you how badly that the Ravens need secondary help and the Orioles need a number 4 hitter. But I think one of the hottest topics up today is Roger Clemens and his recent indictment on perjury charges and obstruction of justice charges. And, you know, there's a lot of people on the radio talking about how, you know, with all this, you know, coming to the surface, that Clemens won't be admitted into the Hall of Fame. And also guys like Barry Bonds and Rafael Palmeiro, Sammy Sosa, fellas like that shouldn't be allowed in the Hall of Fame either. I kind of have a different point of view as far as the Hall of Fame voting goes. I think that, you know, back in those days in the mid to late 90s into the early 2000s when all the home runs were being hit and these steroid allegations pretty much began and started coming to the surface, I think you know, the biggest stars who had the most talent obviously may have produced the most on the field, but then again, who's to say that you know, that if all these guys that were hitting home runs were doing it, who's to say that the pitchers weren't, you know, on steroids as well? So I can understand the argument that you would keep Clemens out and you would want to keep, you know, a guy like Barry Bonds out as well. But what about guys whose names we were mentioned in these reports, but they never really played all that well? You know, and to me it seems more like a witch hunt to get after these great baseball players and all, you know, and all the things they've accomplished, have them wiped away. You know, I think it gets down to some sports writers who have this belief that baseball is this enchanted game. You know, it's so pure and so beautiful, and you know, it shouldn't be tainted by any guy doing his best just to try to make a name for himself and get a leg up, maybe make some more money. You know, you hear all the time guys saying that Hank Aaron never did steroids and Willie Mays never did steroids. You know, but I think everybody already knows by now that amphetamines were running rampant back in those days. Those guys have admitted taking them, and if you know, if you can use amphetamines to get an edge and get you a bit more picked up for a game, make you play a little bit harder, a little bit longer, you know, what's the difference between taking that knowingly and taking steroids, which, you know, at the time weren't illegal in baseball. I mean, they were illegal, you know, federally. It was definitely a criminal charge you were going to face, but, you know, when it came to baseball, they weren't banned. So, you know, I think guys were taking advantage of it. And, you know, we look at all these guys, all these baseball players as demons for taking steroids, and we forget about how about, you know, the football players out there that have taken steroids or even still taking steroids to this day. I mean, I think that there's any sport where it's more obvious that players are actually using PEDs and performance enhancers. I think it's football much more than baseball, but I think that, you know, like I said, since people have this idea that baseball is this pure game and it's, you know, it shouldn't be tainted with or bothered with at all, then anyone who takes steroids is a cheater and doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame. But I challenge anyone to sit back and tell you that Barry Bonds isn't a Hall of Fame baseball player, whether he took some steroids towards the end of his career or not, you know, to give himself that extra home runs to pass Hank Aaron on the home run list. I think there ought to be an asterisk next to it, sure. I mean, if not in the record books, at least in all of our minds, that we know that Barry did something. I mean, a 38-year-old man's skull doesn't grow over a couple of years without doing something crazy, so I think that's obvious. But you know, growing up as a kid, I always followed Pittsburgh a bit. You know, I was definitely a big Orioles fan, but I would always watch Pittsburgh because the Orioles were so bad, so I just picked a team to root for to actually have some kind of hope. And watching the Pittsburgh Pirates play, I've never seen a better baseball player in my life than Barry Bonds, you know, growing up. And I think he had Hall of Fame numbers before the home run spike began. You can take guys like Mark McGwire into account, who personally I don't believe it has a Hall of Fame caliber career as it is. Batting average not that great. Yeah, he hit over 500 home runs, but I don't think that's necessarily the benchmark to get Hall of Fame induction anymore. And he battled injuries for the majority of his career. Who knows how good he could have been? You know, we remember the interviews with McGwire sitting there with the Andro back in his cabinet, and no one said anything back then because it wasn't illegal. And as soon as it goes on the banned substance list, and it turns out that McGwire was using Andro, it's like, oh my goodness, this guy's a cheater, blah blah blah. But everyone knew he was doing it. I think all the players could have been doing it as well. You have no way to prove it. If you look back to those years, the late 90s and the early 2000s, if you just look up at the home run stats, you notice they spike, they go through the roof. But another stat that went through the roof as well is strikeouts. And so, like I said, if strikeouts were, you know, increasing and pitchers were throwing harder and being able to pitch better, hitters were hitting the ball further, hitting more home runs. And I think if everybody's cheating, it's definitely an even playing field. And I think that those players who had Hall of Fame caliber careers should definitely be allowed into the Hall of Fame. And I think they just need to be allowed into the Hall of Fame under the assumption and the you know, agreement that they played during the steroid era, and maybe some of their numbers may be tainted. You know, a lot of the sports writers today, like I said, have that enchanted feeling about baseball and how pure of a game as it is, and you know, they say Mickey Mantle would have never have done that, and you know, the greatest home run hitter. You know, some people think the greatest baseball player of all time, Babe Ruth, would have never done steroids. But, you know, if you're worried about the game of baseball and people tainting its legacy and all that, what makes a guy taking steroids to be a better baseball player and perform better on the field any worse than a guy like Ruth or Mickey Mantle, who drank and smoked and completely destroyed their bodies and deteriorated their bodies, shortening their careers, and I'm sure that took away from the game. How good could have the Mick been if he never drank? You know, and I know he had a freak accident when he stepped in a drain and blew his knee out, but who knows how good he could have been. He could have been the greatest hitter ever. Some people think he's the greatest switch hitter ever. I think that a guy named Eddie Murray might have something to say about that, but that's neither here nor there. Neither here nor there, excuse me. So I just figure that I think if you take it into account just from the guys who got caught doing bad things in the late 90s into the 2000s, I think you got to look at these other guys in the past as well. And if you take their integrity into account, then you got to look at a guy like Ty Cobb, who a lot of people think is one of the greatest baseball players of all time. But look at him personally. The man was a bigot and a racist. He beat up a man with no hands in the stands. You know, also stabbed somebody and got away with it because he was a good ball player. So I think if you're judging players on their integrity, you got to look at everybody from and through history. And that's all I have right now on 1570 AM. Once again, my name's Chris Vinson. Thanks for listening.
There he is, Chris. Nice job. Strong audition. So strong, Glenn was actually listening to it, which is amazing to me. But good work. Now you did you did an internship at 980.
If you love Baltimore sports, you'll love WNST.net.